Hello and welcome to this service and chain waxing of this lovely Cervelo bike. This customer brought this in, he just bought this used and wanted just to get the chain waxed and a little service. As soon as he put it on the ground, I could hear something, I could see a few things, and I knew it was desperate for a bike to be serviced. So the first thing we've got here, we noticed some play in the wheels. That was the noise I heard as he put it down on the ground. He also said that he got some rattling riding along, and I could see the cassette was moving. The steering, as I just showed there, was extremely stiff. The chain was extremely slack in the smallest gears, showing that it was too long, and it was stretched out. So this is all the sort of typical things you get on a used bike. Always good to have them serviced straight away. So we put the new chain into degreaser because we were waxing it, and we set to work on this headset problem with it being too tight. This was an integrated headset. All the cables run through that stem into the frame. So it's quite a complex system. There's two bolts in there, as you would have on anything, your main stem bolt and your lock nut. And so I adjusted all that up and got that in, and then we had a nice smooth steering. This would aid if he was eating a gel or riding with no hands. With it stiff as it was, you would tram line, you would come off quite quickly. Where with it free, you can ride with no hands, and it's just a smoother, easier ride, less fatiguing on long journeys. So everything we do, we talk, we go through a system. So we're just talking up the crown bolts here. Now this was something else I'd noticed. The saddle was so far back that the clamp was at an angle, would be very weak, would either come loose or break. The fact it was a new bike to the customer, he's probably not set it up for himself quite yet anyway. So we decided to move that saddle forwards and get it in the correct place. The saddle was also at an upwards rake, which wouldn't be very good for a male rider. So we drew that down to level. Again, he can adjust that in the future if he needs to, but generally all saddles should be level. It's a UCI requirement, so yeah, we leveled that up. I brought that right to the tip of the max on its adjustment because of the fact that I don't know how set up this bike is for the rider, but I just knew it was wrong, so we adjusted that. You can see a lot of this stuff, this moving here of this bit is all because a lot of the bike was too loose. So that was actually going up to the specified torque, and that needed, that whole seat tube would have slid down if he'd rid that for very long. Left hand brake was loose, right hand brake was okay. So we got the brakes all correct and the hood's back on. And we removed that stretched out chain, too long. So we discarded that as quick as we could. And when I took the wheel off, you can see the play in the cassette, but it was an unusual one. First of all, we noticed the quick release spring the wrong way round, and I just checked this to see what was going on and realised pretty quickly that you'll see in a second that it wasn't the cassette, it was the top ring was not in its groove correctly. So the lock nut was locking against that, but that wasn't locking against the rest of the cassette. So we checked that was working. Once we knew that, into the degreaser goes the cassette. And then we had a little bit of play here. Initially I thought this was going to be bearing work, but I suddenly realised that all it was the bearing preloaders, which sit against the bearing race. You can see the little thing that I pointed to there is on the inner race. It's a preloader. It was just loose. So we tightened that up and all the play went. So that was good. So we gave this a little wipe down. I like to get everything as clean as we can, just it's good housekeeping really for a bike. And this bike, obviously it had just been sold, so it was pretty clean. So this just needed a wipe over really, just to get our fingerprints off it and from the greasy parts that we'd already tackled. And we just give this a little wipe round. Microfiber towels, they're good because they don't scratch, so they're always good for cleaning your bikes. And next up we took off the chain set. So we're just undoing the main bolts here and the preloader again on the bearing there. Off comes the chain set now. We've had a lot of new subscribers. If you're one of those this week, thanks for joining us. Again, you can see on this front wheel that the springs were the wrong way around. Yeah, we launched our AirTags video last week, which has been hugely successful, and we've seen an awful lot of new subscribers. So if you're one of those, welcome to the channel. This is the sort of thing we do on a daily basis, cleaning and servicing bikes, and we like to record one of those a week and get it out onto YouTube for you all to watch, and may give you some tips and tricks along the way. So we just washed down the frame there. You could see there was quite a lot of dirt on this frame. And we used our big softy brush and then a microfiber towel to wipe it down. This bike didn't really need a polish, it just needed a clean. It was not too bad, but you can see, you know, even wiping it down, we pick up quite a bit of grease, and once we've been over the frame, then we just clean off these components, the front derailleur, rear derailleur, jockey wheels, etc., just to get them ready for the new waxed chain, because we don't want any grease on that. Beauty of a waxed chain is the drivetrain does remain nice and clean and grease free. It's a nice way of keeping a bike very, very nice. And so we're just cleaning off the jockey wheels now. There was no need to really take that apart because it was all pretty clean. And now we just use a degreaser here that's actually evaporates into the air, so it's not one that needs washing down. This is one that evaporates, so we give that a wipe down and work our way around all the teeth just to make sure they're all nice and clean for the new chain. And, you know, sort of give a visual inspection of everything while we're doing it. Some of these chain sets are prone to fatigue, so they can break or delaminate. We check that. We've mentioned in other videos there's a little O-ring inside that pedal arm. You just need to make sure that's in there correctly when you refit it. So now we've brought the chain out of the degreaser and the cassette, and we're just going to dry that off, wash it down. I mean, it's a water-based degreaser that we use, so we will wash that down and then dry it off. A fresh microfiber towel for the finishing touch on this one, and you'll see in a second that we show that towel. You know, that's as clean as you want it, so that's good. And then we just wash off the degreaser from the cassette and teeth on all the sprockets. So next week we've got an interesting video, so make sure you like and subscribe to this one, share it on your social medias for us and help us grow our channel. We've got a 80s racer that we're going to freshen up next week, so be sure to keep an eye out for that one. So the chain and the link go into the wax. Molten Speed wax is our wax of choice. It's recognised as the best wax there is, so that's why we use it. And then we just give a little thin coat of grease onto the free hub for the cassette to go onto. And we're just using molten speed powder now to finish the cassette. I personally like this. Some people don't think it does anything, but I just think it gives a nice finish to the components, and it's supposed to be worth a few more extra watts, so it's finishing touches, devil's in the detail. So we put that on. So we're now ready for our lock ring. We made sure that final sprocket was in place correctly and torque that up, and then in goes the skewer with the springs the correct way round. If you haven't got the springs the right way round, you can often not be able to seat the wheel correctly, and it can cause problems, so it's important they do go the right way round, and there is a right and a wrong way for them. So now we're just adjusting the back brake. What I've done here, I've brought it to where I wanted it, and then I've used a little adjuster to centralise the wheel, so that as the pads come on, they come evenly each side of the wheel, so as the wheel doesn't flex, and it gives a more uniform, even braking. And then we put a new end on the cable. It didn't need a cable because that frame was beyond the pinch bolt, so that was okay, so we just wound it back up on the new cable end. And we just broke down the chain wax in the chain to make it flexible, and we start to put on the chain set, and everything begins to go back together now. So on goes the pedal arm and loosely put in the bolts. Preloader, this is a preloader, it just gives the tension correct on the bearings. And then on the other side, I think we got that a little bit wrong on the editing there, that was just a bearing cap, bearing cover, dust cover, whatever you want to call that one. And everything's torqued up. Everything has a spec on a bike, so we make sure we stick to that spec where and when possible. And then we give the chain a dusting of molten speed powder. I like to get all the... Oh, that was it. I think we did it in the wrong order. We normally would have put everything back together before we took the chain out of the wax, but for some reason this day, I think with filming and everything, we sometimes do things in different orders, and That was why we'd switched the filming from removing the chain to putting the group set back on. So through goes the chain. Make sure you thread it correctly through your derailleur. There is a right and a wrong way with that. There's a little guide that if you get it the wrong side, you just end up with hideous noise and grooving. And then we just index the gears, check everything's working perfectly. As you can see, when everything's on the smallest, we've got none of that chain slack that we had before. That would have just probably caused an accident eventually. His chain would have bounced off and he'd have been in trouble. We give that molten speed powder a little blow off with an airline. And then finally we got this chain keep here. It just stops the chain dropping off the small ring and chewing around the frame. And this was actually closer to the frame than it was the chain, so it was completely wrong. I don't think it had ever been set up. And then again on the front wheel, we noticed those preloaders were completely loose, so the wheel was rattling around. And again, it didn't need bearings, it just needed setting up correctly. So a little bit of grease on the end of the skewer, and that's ready to refit. So we're almost getting there now with this bike. It's beginning to almost get to stage of riding. So again, we just adjust the brake to feel the same as the back. Torque up the pinch bolts. Adjust, this is the left and right so that it gets that wheel dead in the center of the pads. And then we just also just measure that both brakes are feeling the same. And then torque up the pedals. So, you know, we do literally go through everything when we check a bike. Just checking the accessory bolts here. I don't do those with a torque wrench because if you're pinching up against plastic or whatever, you can just spread it. So I just do that by feel. And then we just dust around the bike with a torque wrench, just going over the odd nuts and bolts that we need to. So this is how you should be looking after your bikes and, you know, giving them a little bit of love and attention. And then we have our beautiful Cervelo S series ready for the road. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.